Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Summer with me today. And thank you, Summer, for joining us today. I met Summer through another podcast guest that I had on recently, and she's doing a collaborative book with a whole group of people. You might have heard of it on other podcast episodes, the Women Who Boss Up book. And so I'm so glad to have you on here today. Those who are watching the video version may notice that Summer has some interesting things on the whiteboard behind her, which made me realize that we're in the right place, because if we're going to talk about postpartum doula work or any of the things on that whiteboard, we're talking about womb-centered healing. So thank you again so much for joining us. And I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more and share with us about your womb-centered healing journey.
So my name is Summer Hartman, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona with my husband and my two adult children actually are moving out of the house. Talking about womb squeezing, I feel like I need another child. But I run a company called Summer Sleep Secrets, originally was Sleeping Sweet Peas. And I help parents and new moms right after birth with their new babies. And my main focus is the healing of the body, mom's mindset. We talk about getting the baby on a healthy routine with breastfeeding. I'm very much about the whole care of the whole family. So I take care of the parents and, the moms, the dads, everyone. So, and then in the end result, I work as a newborn care specialist at night, and I sleep shape the baby's sleep through the night for 12 weeks, and they sleep usually 10 to 12 hours a night. So, and it's all with no crying. So, it's a very gentle approach. And I've been doing this for my oldest set of twins are 26. So I've had a lot of kids over the years. But over the last 14 years of working as a newborn care specialist, for sure, that's been my title. So.
Wow. So you got into this after your twins were born, and you
Actually, I was a nanny for the twins. So my oldest set of adult children, I was their nanny at 18.
These aren't children.
Yeah, my own children are 20 and 19, almost 19. She's 18.
Okay, so it was around that same time that you birthed your own children, but it sounds like you were a nanny.
Yep, I've been a nanny.
You still are calling them your children because you helped them in their infancy.
Yeah, I mean, I was with them for a long time. So, it's amazing how you don't have to birth a child to feel like they're your children. My kids are always, I had foster children, and those babies and kids were my children. So they were not treated any different than my own. And I think that's a gift. That's a gift to have. You can really just bond with anybody's child. But I also know that I have a really good, they're not my babies, they're my clients' babies. And so it's I'm bonding, making sure they're healthy, making sure mom is healthy, and I can leave and walk out of the door and know nothing's going to happen because they're doing good. But still love them when I'm with them. And it's a gift for sure. And
so did you undergo some training to become a sleep with the baby kind of sleep specialist? I mean, I've never heard of this service, and I'm a trained doula and worked with mentoring and all that. I've never heard of this this is a much more intimate than, say, somebody that you just consult with about sleep in your child.
So actually, I didn't take the training in the beginning. I just kind of naturally fell into it and started working for an agency, working for nights.
How did you fall into it? I mean, did you know that you had some kind of ability to support babies learning how to sleep? I mean, did you approach some strangers and said, "Let me sleep with your baby"? I mean, how did you fall into this? This is
so I answered an ad on Craigslist in 2007, and they were looking for baby nurses overnight or newborn care specialists to sleep, basically, not sleep, but to be home with the family at night so the mom could get sleep and then you do all the feedings, or you bring the mom or the baby to the mom to nurse, and then you take the baby back to the nursery. And like sleep is a part of the whole process. So there was no specific training in the beginning. I took trainings later, but there was no specific training for me. I actually just figured it out. But I had my own kids at the time too, and I had been a nanny by that point for 15 years. So it just naturally, I put kids on a routine. It was just a natural rhythm for me. I mean, and I had foster kids. I had 5 foster babies prior to me becoming a newborn care specialist. So I had them on routines and schedules, you know, the minute they came in my house, because their lives were so chaotic and they came from such horrible situations that all I did was put them on a routine and love them and feed them and playtime, and just always had that rhythm. So, you know, it just naturally came to me. I took trainings, you know, in 2008 and then 2014 and 16 with certain organizations, but still was not taught anything about sleep. So I wrote my own book. And
did you write an actual book on that?
Yeah, I actually wrote a whole book. So this is my book, and it's my method. It's all my secrets. So it's like,
wow, tell us the name of the book. It was kind of hard to see on the cover.
So this one, it's all, it's actually not published yet. I got to make a published version, but this one is for trainings. So it's Summer Sleep Secrets, and I just, I wrote it so that I can train other people how to do it, because there was never really a clear training on how to sleep train babies healthy, you know, like without full cry it out or all these other methods. So I created my own, I had my own method. And when I wrote it, it was quite surprising that I had created a method my own for myself. Excuse me.
So can you just give us a detailed, like not an extensive, but a mini detailed outline of some of the key points? You know, if you had to tell us 3 key points for sleep training a baby, or 5 key points, what would they be?
So first off, food. It's a major point for sleeping. If the baby's not getting enough to eat during the day, they will not sleep through the night, and you can't take any food away. You can't take any ounces away. That's number 1. The other one is the schedule, the routine during the day, to make sure they have plenty of naps. Also teaching them to not need to be held all the time, but like I do like 2 naps a day at least in the crib, and then the rest they can be held. So it's not like strict, but gives guidelines. Bedtime routine, huge. If you don't have a bedtime routine, then chaos happens. And also waking up for the day at the same time. So a lot of parents, even I have a triplet family I'm working with right now. She lets them sleep until between 7:30 and 8:30. And I told her today, nope, wake them up at 7:30, keep them on the same schedule, because at night it's varying when I feed them. And then I can't really train or sleep shape them at all, because I don't know what the day was like. So I'm letting it slide all of next week until they move into their new house. And once they move into the new house, I'm going to be much more strict. And she understands that. So, you know, you have all of these steps in place. Everything falls into place. So I guess the first one would be wake up at the same time in the morning, make sure they're taking their naps, make sure that they're eating every 3 hours, every 2 to 3 hours if they're breastfeeding. We need as many ounces as we can get in them during the day, and then have a bedtime routine, and then letting them sleep as long as they want at night. Don't do a dream feed. I don't even believe in dream feeds. I want them sleeping as long as possible, and then we'll feed them, and then they wake up every 3 hours after that, and then we'll start working the pattern down through the night. So
how does this fit with the current philosophies of breastfeeding that talk about feed on demand? That there may be, you know, times when the baby needs more frequent feeding and like that.
So you can do that. I don't really care about it. So right now I have a breastfeeding mom, and this is strange because I'm like a strict scheduler, but when it comes to breastfeeding, I can't be as strict. I have a baby who's massive, and he just needs a lot of food. And so I have mom feeding every 3 hours, but he gets a 10-minute top off before his nap. So he's not getting a full 30-minute feed, but he's getting enough to have his nap, and it holds him off until the next feed. So I schedule it, but I allow for some leeway with breastfeeding. Breastfeeding, we just can't put strictures on. Like, it has
Yeah.
to be flexible.
Yeah, but because, I mean, I tell the story a lot about how the doctors told my mother when I was born to feed me only every 4 hours
Oh yeah,
and to leave
I've heard that.
me to cry it out. I think I heard you mention that.
Hmm.
And I feel like that kind of a, a schedule was deliberately given to the doctors by the formula
Yeah,
creation companies to disrupt
yeah,
successful breastfeeding developing for women so that then they would have to
yeah. In the
rely on
1950s
baby
and
formula.
60s, in the 1950s and 60s, the formula companies were pushing formula, so they weren't making it as conducive to nurse
Hmm.
in the 1950s and 60s.
Well, this was
And then,
1970, so I think
but
there
even
was
1970s, they started to see at the
uh-huh,
end of the 1970s, they
uh-huh.
started to see a more of a you could say the Woodstock way, where it was like free love. So, nurse all the time, you know. So it started changing at the end of the 70s. But between that 50s and 70s, there was a big push for formula. Like, that was the it thing.
Hmm.
So yeah,
With
it was
no recognition of how unhealthy that was actually. I mean, like I almost died from diarrhea in the first year of my life because of it.
wow. Yeah, I mean, it honestly, yeah, I remember my mom telling me she hated, like, I was her bane of existence when I was born, because I've always had gut issues. And so I couldn't, she nursed me all the time, but she said I couldn't keep anything down. Like, I had reflux or colic. Like, I screamed all the time. And so, and even my aunt said, she was like, "You were the worst baby ever." She's like, "You were so bad." She goes, "For you to work with babies, it cracks all of us up because you were like the worst kid ever." And I was a brat. I mean, I was so bratty as a kid. And I think it was because I was just really smart. Like, I was really aware of everything around me. Like, I knew intuitively who was bad and who was good. Like, I knew the cousins I did not like, and I knew the friends my parents had who I hated because they were bad people. And so, and I knew that at 5, 6 years old. So, and my mom even said today, she's like, "You've always been intuitive. You've always been able to see who's good and who's not." And
Wow. So I imagine
yeah,
that your colicky response may have had something to do with whatever emotional difficulties were going on in your family at that time, whether there were any kind of interactions that your mom had with people, maybe even not in the family, that were stressing her out during the
oh yeah,
day. If she was stressed out, perhaps
yeah,
even her dietary choices. I
yeah,
know that nowadays people really look at the mom's diet to help
yeah,
to alleviate colic in babies and stuff like that. And they weren't necessarily looking at that when you were
yeah.
being breastfed, nor were they looking at that when I was being
No,
breastfed for the 6 weeks that I got. At least you got to be
I know.
breastfed.
I got breastfed the whole year and a half. But there was a lot of turmoil when I came around, because my parents couldn't conceive me for 8 years. They tried, and then once they got, well, then she got sick, and before I was born, she got really ill, and they were in the process of adopting, because they had tried for so long. So they adopted my sister, and then from a teenager who was pregnant. And so they did a private adoption uh, while she was pregnant with her. And then mom got really sick, and then she found out she was pregnant with me.
What
So
kind of
they were
sick?
adopting, and then she was sick because she was pregnant with me. So my sister
Oh,
was born 4 hours apart. So my
you were born 4 hours apart with your sister. And so
yeah,
your mom was really sick because she was pregnant. It was
pregnant.
pregnancy
Yeah,
sickness. Did she
yeah.
have just like morning sickness or was it more
Like
severe?
24 hours morning sickness,
Uh-huh.
and just like they thought like her liver or kidney or something was off. Like, she just was in the hospital. Probably had that bad, like the Prince had. Like, it's that hyper. What is that? The illness that makes you super sick, that you vomit nonstop.
Yeah, I've
You know
heard
what I
the term,
mean?
but I don't remember the name. And I had a friend recently actually who, um, or an acquaintance more like,
Yeah,
who again the doctors thought something was terribly wrong. She didn't even know she was pregnant, and maybe your
yeah.
mom didn't even realize she was pregnant at
No,
first
she didn't know
because
at all. So she just
right,
kept
they'd been
vomiting.
trying for so many years. Why would she be pregnant?
Right.
And something must be seriously wrong. I'm just vomiting all the time. And I remember with my friend, what a relief it was for
Yeah,
her to go and discover that the reason she was so sick all the time was because she was pregnant. It was like,
yeah.
oh, no wonder. No, it's not some major organ failure or some weird, mysterious infection or
Right.
anything like
So that
that.
was kind of like the first of like the disasters, like, like, and my mom is a very unlike, she can only handle so much stress. Like she doesn't handle stress well at all. And so to get pregnant and then have an adoption also was just overwhelming to her mental state. So when I came in, I was born at midnight. My sister was born, or I was born at 11, I believe. And then she was born at like 4 a.m. So, we were we were in the same room together from the moment she was born. So they treated us like twins, but we weren't. And so my parents treated her different than they did me. And she always felt that. And I didn't see it because I was so unaware of them. I didn't think anything of it the way they treated her. I didn't think anything of it.
How did
Um,
they treat her different?
um, there's a lot of background to it. Just my sister was always defiant, um, and very like knew she didn't belong. Like intuitively knew she was not a part of the family. And so there was always this back. My dad bonded with her, and then my mom bonded with me, and it was just very awkward, very awkward. And she ran away a few times throughout our life, and then she fell down the rabbit hole of drugs. So she's no longer with us. She passed away in January.
Oh, wow.
It's the life we have. We choose the path we have. We can. She was raised the same as I was, with a very wealthy family. Always had everything. I mean, I had every car I wanted. I had anything I wanted. We both did. Whatever we wanted, my parents got it. Um, we worked at a young age. We worked hard. We worked in like ice cream shops, and we worked for my parents from 12 years on. We had everything we wanted. We earned money, but uh, genetics plays a huge part in things. And my sister was very much like her birth mother. And once we met her birth mother, I was like, wow, like it was spot on. And the funniest thing about the whole thing is my sister's mother, birth mother, was the spitting image of me. She looked just like me. I had like blonde hair. She had curly blonde hair. She had the same round face. She had pink. We looked exactly alike. And my sister looked like her father, who was Indian. And she had beautiful long brown curly hair, and she had that beautiful skin that the Indian color have. Like she was totally opposite of me.
You mean
And
Indian from India or
no, Indian, like
Native American?
Native American Indian. Yeah. And so she just had that beautiful skin and dark hair. And so, it was just kind of funny when we met her mom. I was just like, are you sure that I'm not the one that was not adopted? Because I really feel like we may have switched.
Uh-huh. But then her father was looked she
Yeah.
looked more like her father, so
Yeah.
but in a sense there was this twin kind of activity going on.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, I have a huge story. I mean, that's,
Well,
it's,
that's what this pod show is about, is all these stories and these stories of ancestry and how they influence our lives, how our ancestry influences our lives.
yeah.
So deeply. Like, you say there's so much to the genetics, and looking at her mother's personality,
Hmm.
because her mother carried her for 9 months
Yeah.
and had all kinds of experiences. But also the egg that made your sister was
Hmm.
in your mother's body for a good portion of the time that she was in her mother's body
Yeah.
developing.
Right.
And so that genetic influence just goes back through the generations.
Yeah.
And if there were any stresses or traumas, I mean, our parents sort of pass all that on to us.
Yeah, she was a spit and image of her mother in every aspect. Her mother was a drug addict very young.
Mhm.
She did drugs, LSD, when she was pregnant with her. She grew marijuana when we met her. She was growing marijuana in Hawaii. It was just like, and they were just, the personalities were so much alike. It was, you couldn't, it's like Jenny figured out that she belonged somewhere. That was like, I went there by myself with her. We were 17, and my parents are idiots. I don't know why they did this, but they shipped us over there to meet her mother. They made me go with her. They were like, you go with her. And I'm like, why don't you guys go with her? And I'm like, because I had to work. I mean, like, I didn't want to go. And they're like, no, you go. And they sent us there. And, this was a drugged woman who was so unhealthy. And they sent out their 17-year-old daughters there. It was I was the goodie. I was the good one. Sophie, or Jenny, was always the one that wanted to try all the bad things. And so I was always like, I'm like sitting there going, no, we're not smoking pot. I'm like, stop. Like, what are you doing? It was just so stressful for me to be her caretaker. I ended up leaving her, and I went to the other side of the island by myself and stayed with some 80-year-old couple that I found at a cafe. I was like, I got to get away. Like, so I took care of myself for that 3 weeks and left her, and whatever happened. Well, I wasn't there. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So, what an interesting combination of experiences, and the stress that your
Yeah.
mom was under, it seems, was probably influencing your breastfeeding. Now, was she breastfeeding your sister at that time too?
No, my sister was taken away. The mother decided to keep her. She came home with us, and then my parents said she came and picked her up and took her. She had some leeway with the adoption, and because mom had just had me, she didn't care. She was like, "That's fine if you want your daughter back." So Jenny left and didn't. And then at 15 months old, she was dropped on the doorstep with a note and left. Yeah. So mom had me for like the first 15 months technically by herself, which was good for bonding. And then Jenny came back with a note in a car seat. So,
Wow. So, when we look at the work that I do around our birth story
mm-hmm,
and those early hugely influential moments of infancy, which I'm sure you're aware of in
mm-hmm,
your work as well, how those times create a blueprint for our life. So
mm-hmm,
it's not only the genetics, but it's also everything that went on in that mother's womb when your sister was in there, and yourself included.
mm-hmm,
Everything that was going on in your mother, the stress hormones get in that amniotic fluid and turn on and off different genetic um,
traits. Yeah.
traits. And so, um, and then that same thing is happening in those early um, months,
Yeah.
and throughout our entire childhood. But those early
Yeah.
months of infancy, it creates this blueprint for our
Yeah.
lives. So being there, being with her mother, and then being left on the, first being given to and then taken back, and then all
Mm-hmm.
of that probably created such a disruption. And who knows what kind of feeding schedule or any of that she was on.
She was living in Seattle in a commune. I know that the mother had lived in a commune with a bunch of people. So Jenny was
Uh-huh.
taken care of by just a huge amount of different people,
Uh-huh.
probably nursed by multiple different women. She just, her start was just horrific. If, we don't know the drugs, the things that happened before she came. And then my parents, on the other hand, are the completely opposite of what that was. My parents were wealthy. Um, white collar, wealthy people. I mean, in the 80s, they made $80,000 in the 80s. So they were more privileged, and um, it's just a different way of living. Like, for her to go from her mom, who was probably baby wearing her constantly and probably just hiking with her. I imagine that's kind of how it was when we met her at 17. that she was very earthy, to being with my mom, who was like not touchy feely.
Mm.
So she went, like I don't have, and my kids are this way too, and I feel bad, but I don't like being touched. I've never liked being around people or being touched. So it has to go to when I was a kid. It has to be because it was something I just wasn't used to or wanted to do. So I mean, yeah, there's so much, but genetics, I know for a fact genetics played a big role in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And then she always felt left behind. She would say that. She's like, she was 5 years old and she packed up her little backpack, and I remember her looking at me in the bedroom. She's like, I'm moving, I am leaving this place, I don't want to be here anymore, I hate mom and dad. And she's 5, and I'm looking at her like, fine. I'm like, where are you gonna go? And she's like, I don't know. She put on her little red and her little rainbow bright jacket, and she put her backpack, and she had her doll underneath her arm, and she walked out of the house like a little boss, and like literally walked down the train tracks in front of our house like she was leaving. And I was just like, I just watched her from the upstairs window. I'm like, well, she left. I'm like,
Well, a lot of little kids run away like that, even if they
yeah.
don't even.
Oh, it was just funny to me. I'm like, my mom would go out running after her. My dad would, it was just so, but that was like at 5. And that was our whole life, was running after her. Like she ran away multiple times.
Mm.
I finally at like 11, when she ran away again, I knew I didn't care where she went. I was just like, Mom, come home from work. And she's like, where's Jenny? I'm like, I don't know. She ran away again. And then she was like, okay. So then she just starts calling all the friends and family, and nobody knew where she was. And finally she came back like a couple of days later, and Mom was just like, well, you're grounded. Like at this point, I don't know what to do with you.
Wow. So I imagine that sort of being along for the ride with this difficult adoption story that your sister had, and her difficulties sort of being in the family anyway, that influenced you in a lot of ways, that like having this being an unexpected pregnancy in the middle of an adoption, and having all of that has affected you, and perhaps even made you more aware of the importance of this infancy time, and fueled your passion for this kind of work of supporting new babies and new parents and new families at a time that a lot of people just sort of overlook and don't get support for the stressful things that might be going on, the damaging effects of sleep deprivation long term for the parents, there's just not even, many people just don't even pay any attention to it, or haven't been for many generations. And so I'm so reassured by the fact that there are these organizations that are providing this kind of support.
I think our back history and our careers is key. Like if you can find a passion, let's put that you have a passion for what you do because of your past or what you've struggled with. And my passion has been babies since day one. Like I gravitated to babies, when I was 2-3 years old. Like a friend had a baby, my mom's friend, I would hold them nonstop. So that was my passion from a very young age. I can't even say it's literally been 40 years with me and babies. It's not necessarily, because that's what I loved the most, was babies. So I think that's a part of being who you are, is finding out who you are, is finding out what you're passionate about. And if you can create a career around that passion, that's priceless. And so my history with my family, which I'm discussing with you, which is not on any podcast or probably not even discussed in my family. We rarely talk about what happened when I was young. Did shape everything about my life. My years from baby on has literally shaped where I've come from. So, and how I do things.
Well, and I feel that's true for everyone, and we just don't recognize it. But yours is so obvious. I mean, you probably were caring for your sister when she was a baby, when you were a baby.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was almost like them adopting your sister might have been the thing that called you in.
Yeah. I was always taking care of her. Yeah. Always. I was always the caregiver with her. And probably because I felt it from my parents, the anguish or the anger or whatever was going on with them, because there was a lot of violence too with my family that I'm not going to get into. But we were always a pair. Like if we did, I always took care of her. If I got hurt, then she took care of me. We always got hurt together. So, it was like we repaired ourselves together. So, um, it's weird. It's weird. It was a weird relationship. It was not that we were sisters, but not birth sisters. It was different. So
Yeah, that's very unique in that, to have that all that sequence of events. I mean, you couldn't have planned it,
no,
right? Nobody would have planned that to work out that way, and yet there it is, and it's working out that way. And what are you going to do?
yeah,
So you just go from one moment to the next,
yeah,
and deal with it the best you can. So
yeah. Teaches
so
resilience in children, though. That's what I teach my families. Like you might think something damaging happened, but really it could be at that time like very shocking or hurtful or whatever. But your child can be really resilient and come back from that, hurtful disaster that happened in their life and be really strong human beings. So, my mom's always said, I don't know who you are. She's like, you're so different from all the rest of the family. She goes, you're a powerhouse. And I said, I was a powerhouse from the time I came out of the womb. That's why I screamed all the time.
right. I mean, I feel like babies who cry a lot, there's a certain quality, and maybe you've heard this in your work, of crying that feels like the baby is saying, this is not what I signed up for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Wait a second here. Something's wrong with this picture. You got the wrong, I ended up in the wrong space. I don't know what, but get me out of here, and feeling completely powerless to do anything because they're an infant and
Yeah.
completely dependent on these parents. But I feel like babies have more of a sense of self-consciousness than we give them credit for. And
Yeah.
then
Totally.
there's more of a development of intelligence there. There's a soul knowing, like there's a connection to spirit there,
Mm-hmm.
where the soul is like coming in and checking things out, and but doesn't have can't talk, can't move around on its own, and it's just like this.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of baby, and then the parents stressed out, the milk might not taste very good because the
Yeah.
mom is eating whatever, and not being able to say anything or influence the situation because nobody's listening to them because
Yeah.
they're a baby. So I totally get it when
Yeah.
babies are just
I
crying
think,
unconsolably.
yeah, it's stress. I mean, there's crying. Not all crying is harmful. Crying can be very beneficial in some cases. Like some need to burn off energy because they've been held so much they're angry because they want to be put down. But parents think they need to be held because they're crying because they need to be held. But babies like their own space too. So we can overhold and actually create a problem. So, there's just a balance. I find that if you have a balance in life, then everything just goes with the flow. My best client, actually, and I love them, but they were really strict. They were like super strict with the routine. Like they woke up in the morning at 5 a.m. The husband had his coffee. The 3-year-old got up at 6 a.m., had his milk with daddy, and the baby got up at 7 o'clock, and mom got up with the baby. Everyone was down for bed at 7. And the baby slept at 6 weeks old. She slept 12 hours a night. Like I didn't do anything. I just sat in the chair. Like I don't even know what to do. I wrote a book while I was there because I was like, what else do I do? And, but they were just really good at follow through. They had really good discipline with the children. Like they didn't hesitate. There was love so much among themselves that like he loved his wife. You could tell she was struggling. He was like, what do I need to do to make you feel better? Let me make you a smoothie. Or it was just like, people just need to understand, like, if the husband, and by the way, most men have postpartum depression too. It's not just women. So, and especially from like past history, like what I had in my childhood, their childhood had been bad. And so triggers happen after birth. And so I talk to parents a lot together about the emotion side of things. Like, how are you handling a new baby? I see they're crying a lot because of XYZ, because your anxiety is so high, and both of them are button heads. So if you're yelling at each other, why would the baby be crying? Because the baby's feeling your attention. Everything you put towards your child fills. So, the more calm we are, the more we have control of the situation, the better off your child's going to be. That goes with milk flow, sleeping, just overall feelings of goodness. And right now with COVID, it's even a higher stress because we don't know if we're going to get sick and die. We don't know. Like, there's just this like huge what if. Um, so I impart like everything I learned as a child, I've definitely imparted into my career because I can intuitively see what is going on in each family, even on the phone. I don't have to see them. I can tell them over the phone exactly what's going on and fix it. I just got a really good email from somebody who I fixed in a 45-minute call that she's been struggling with for 4 months. And I got an email with this long, oh my God moment, like Summer fixed me in 45 minutes. So,
Well, I'm curious because some of these things that you're describing are not simple fixes. You can't just tell a parents to stop yelling at each other. I mean, this is probably, years worth of
yeah,
relationship imbalance that
yeah,
or habits or trauma,
right.
um, maybe a simple fix from this 145-minute conversation happens once in a while, but I'm imagining that oftentimes the challenges, the imbalances are much more complex than you can,
So
and
you
you
can
might be able
spend
to.
months with a client. We can spend months with a client. We
Mm,
could, do therapy. I offer that. It's thousands of dollars. But in reality, they just didn't realize their actions were causing the issue.
yeah.
Once I'm able to actually say, this is what I see or hear, does this feel like what's going on? They are like, oh, I didn't even think that he would feel that, that the baby would feel that. Or I didn't, yeah, like I had another client, the husband was yelling at her on the phone while I was on the phone. And she was just like, see, this is how he's acting with me. And I was like, it stresses me out because my cortisol level goes up when I hear an angry parent in the background. And I said, here, just let me talk to him because at this point, she can't reach him and he's so mad. And I just get on the phone with him. I'm like, you realize that what you're doing is harmful because it's making her not be able to nurse, and you want her to nurse because you don't want to pay the cost of formula. But she's so upset that her milk flow isn't going to flow because her body's so tense, she can't release that milk. I said, so in order for her to get to the breastfeeding journey she needs, I need to talk to you about your feelings. I said, what's making you so angry? Is it because you don't have a relationship with your wife right now? Or because she can't give you the attention you need? Is it because you feel depressed? I said, men have postpartum depression. It is a factor. And he just started crying. And I was like, see, that's postpartum depression right there. I'm like, that's baby blues. I'm like, that's fixable. I'm like, good. I'm glad you're letting it out. I'm going to let it out because you're feeling the stress. And then after he walked off the phone, he like handed the phone over to her. She was like, that was like a moment for her to see because he's just so pent up with anger. And I worked for them at night actually. So I actually went into work and she said everything calmed down after I had talked to him. So, it's just, I've dealt with that in my entire life, men being angry. So not with my own husband. My husband's like amazing, but with family members, I've had that issue. And so I can talk people pretty much off of any ledge just on the phone. And he was amazing. He understood that it was most likely postpartum depression for him. And then once we figured that out, he got better. So just talking to somebody sometimes really does help. I'm not a therapist. I'm not educated in that way. I've never went to college for that. But it does help to talk. So it can make a huge difference on a 45-minute call
Mm.
before.
Just to even recognize that, wow, my behavior is perpetuating the situation instead of, and people never learned that kind of emotional wisdom, that
Yeah.
they never learned that. And maybe then they might go and seek. Do you have some people sometimes go and seek therapy or seek
Oh yeah.
additional help because of what you shared with them when they realize, oh my goodness, this is hurting my baby the way I'm behaving, and it's understandable that this is coming up for me because I'm in, this
Yeah.
postpartum period that maybe I need a little extra
I
support.
hope that they do. I've even met with doctors, like went in to sleep train their twins, and I met a doctor who was the father, and the wife was having postpartum depression. It was very obvious to me because I look for those signs. Why is this not working? Why are we not functioning as a family right now? And that's one of the top ones is postpartum depression, and the anxiety of crying. Tips everyone over because like a baby could be crying all the time, and you have twins, it's multiple times. So yeah, it's crazy. So the husband, I looked at him and I said, what's wrong with, what's going on? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, your wife has postpartum depression from what I can tell. Like, these are all the symptoms. And I show him all the symptoms in my graph that I bring. And he was like, oh my gosh. And he looks at her and she looks at the graph and she goes, burst into tears. She's like, this is how I feel. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, why didn't I catch this? I said, because you're in it. Doesn't matter, you're a doctor, you're in it. So you don't see the signs because you're just every day you're just struggling through it because you're trying to just get through this time period,
Mm-hmm.
thinking it'll get better and get better. And yeah, he did help her. They both got medical support. So I think every job I learn something new. I never feel like I've stopped learning. Like I learn every single day something new, and I think that makes, like, I don't even know what comes out of my mouth sometimes when I'm coaching a client, and I'm like, really? Yeah, that's fine. So it's honestly, yeah, I think I am who I am because of my parents and the way that I was raised, that I can actually talk to people the way I do. I have no problem talking to an irate husband or getting in his face when I'm there and be like, okay, let's have a chat because like this is unacceptable. I no one else I know in this industry would probably do that. I have very much like strong-willed. And I like to right wrongs, which has been my whole entire life. I've always been in the middle of like, okay, let's get this figured out. Like I'm done. Like, and I think that's why my clients like me. I'm totally different. I train, my classes are different. Everything's different. How I talk to people is different. And one person told me that I was the most real interview that she had given. She's like, you are so real. And like, you tell the honest truth about things. I see it as I say it. I see it, I'm going to say it.
Well,
So,
wonderful, Summer. Our time has just flown by. I've been so fascinated by the stories you're telling and the development of this um, wonderful profession that you're sharing about. If someone wanted to get in touch with you from the listeners here on this podcast, how might they do so?
they can go to my website, summersleepsecrets.com, or they can reach me on Facebook. They can just research my name, Summer Hartman, on Google, and I'll come up.
Okay.
And the book that I'm a part of with a bunch of other professionals is about just how we kind of, just a real short chapter of about how we overcame illness. For me, overcame illness and still created a company
Mm-hmm.
and bossed up.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't let things drag me down. And I think during this time of we're living in, it's a good storyline because COVID could definitely drag us down.
And there's more than that could drag us down at
There's
these times.
cancer, there's everything, but they're not saying any of that. But yeah, everything can drag us down. So, but the book will be out in August. So,
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And listeners know that if you want to learn more about womb-centered healing, you can subscribe to the Womb-Centered Healing Temple newsletter at wombcenteredhealing.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you'll know when the next one comes out. So thanks so much again, Summer, and
thanks for having me.
you're welcome. That's all for now. Until next time.